Welcome to this peaceful moment. Here, you will discover stories inspired by the quiet beauty of Japan. Each tale is like a soft breeze through a bamboo grove, carrying you away from the worries of the day. Imagine the scent of blooming cherry blossoms and the gentle flow of a nearby clear stream. Let these words and sounds cradle your mind in calm and serenity. Tonight, permit yourself to drift into a restful sleep. Let us begin this journey together. Autumn leaves on the stone bridge. Prologue: the bridge in mist. The mist of early autumn wrapped itself gently around the valley, softening the edges of trees and river, blurring the outlines of the old stone bridge. The bridge stood silent, ancient, its arches spanning the slow-moving current below. Moss clung to its stones, deep green and damp, while fallen maple leaves, red and gold, drifted across its worn surface, as if the season itself had chosen to walk there. The village beyond was quiet, still holding its breath in the hour before dawn. Smoke rose faintly from a few chimneys, threads of gray mingling with the mist. The river whispered under the bridge, carrying with it more leaves, more fragments of the seasons passing. Each leaf floated, swirled, caught in the current, and slipped away beneath the arches into a future unseen. Upon this bridge, a solitary figure paused. His name was Renji, a man no longer young, yet not yet old, his face lined with years of labor and memory. He leaned upon the cool stone railing, his breath visible in the chill of morning. His eyes followed the drifting leaves, as though each one carried a thought or a memory of his own. For Renji, the bridge had always been more than a crossing. It was a witness. It had stood longer than any house in the village, longer than any elder could recall. He had crossed it as a boy chasing dragonflies, as a young man burdened with baskets of rice, as a husband walking beside his wife, as a father guiding small hands. Now he crossed it alone, yet the bridge remained, unchanged, steadfast. The mist curled and shifted. For a moment, Renji imagined he saw shadows upon the bridge, echoes of the past, children laughing, elders walking slowly with staffs, lovers pausing at dusk. But when he blinked, the bridge was empty once more. He exhaled slowly, placing both palms on the rough stone. The morning was beginning, and with it another day of work, another day of quiet persistence. Yet before moving on, he allowed himself one more glance at the leaves floating away beneath him. Each one seemed like a whisper of impermanence, a reminder that nothing lingered forever, not even autumn. Still, the bridge endured. And so, Renji thought, perhaps memory, like stone, could remain even as leaves were carried away. The sun had not yet risen, but the mist began to glow faintly with the promise of light. Renji straightened his back, adjusted the strap of his satchel, and took his first step across the bridge. The sound of his sandals against the stone was soft, but in the silence of the morning, it echoed as though the bridge itself acknowledged his passage. Thus began another day in the village, beneath the gaze of the stone bridge, among the drifting autumn leaves. Chapter 1: The Old Pathway. The path to the bridge wound gently from the heart of the village. It was an old road, narrow and uneven, its stones pressed into the earth by generations of feet. In places, the stones were cracked, worn smooth by rain, their edges softened like the lines of an elder's face. Alongside the road, tall grasses leaned inward, bending gracefully under the weight of dew. Renji knew each turn, each curve of the pathway. His own footprints had mingled with countless others here since childhood. There was the bend where a persimmon tree leaned over the path, heavy with orange fruit in autumn. There was the cluster of bamboo that whispered in the wind, their tall stalks creaking like wooden flutes. There was the small shrine set into the hillside, its stone fox statues moss-covered, their expressions unreadable in the half-light. As he walked, the air carried the fragrance of fallen leaves, earthy, faintly sweet. A crow called from a distant cedar, its voice harsh but not unwelcome. Somewhere beyond the fields, a farmer was already at work, the soft rhythm of a hoe striking soil drifting faintly through the mist. Renji's pace was unhurried. He was no longer the boy who once ran barefoot along this path. Each step now was deliberate, careful, as though the earth itself deserved respect. His sandals pressed lightly against the stones, making the faintest sound, blending with the whispers of the bamboo. He paused at the shrine and bowed lightly. The small offering box was empty save for a few copper coins, dulled with age. The paper streamers tied to the rope above the shrine swayed gently, stirred by a breeze that came from nowhere. Renji remembered his mother stopping here often, pressing her palms together, murmuring words he never fully caught. He had not prayed often himself, but habit guided him now. He bowed once more before continuing along the path. The mist thickened as the path descended toward the river. Renji could hear the water long before he saw it, a steady murmur like a voice speaking in another language. The sound mingled with the rustle of leaves falling through branches, each one landing softly upon earth or stone. At last, the trees parted, and the bridge revealed itself again. From this side, approaching through the mist, it seemed almost otherworldly, a shape suspended between earth and sky. The arches rose solid and unyielding, yet softened by moss and lichen, touched by centuries of rain and wind. Renji stepped onto the first stone of the bridge. It was cool beneath his foot, damp with mist. He walked slowly, his eyes tracing the patterns of fallen leaves scattered across the surface. Red maples, yellow ginkgo, brown oak, each leaf had its own story of falling, of drifting, of landing here. Midway across, he stopped. The river below was clearer now in the strengthening light. It flowed steadily, carrying with it more leaves, each spinning briefly before being pulled downstream. The sight was familiar, yet it never lost its quiet power. The river was time itself, carrying moments away, carrying people away, carrying everything towards some unseen horizon. Renji placed a hand on the railing, its stone rough beneath his fingers. He thought of his father, who had once stood here with him, pointing to the river, saying the water never stops, yet the bridge remains. Remember this, Renji. At the time, he had not understood. Now, he thought he did. The mist began to thin, revealing more of the village across the bridge. Roofs emerged, the smoke of morning fires curling upward, the faint sound of a bell ringing to mark the hour. Life was awakening, yet the bridge still held its quiet solitude. Renji continued walking until he reached the far side. He turned once, looking back at the span of stone, the leaves scattered across it, the river whispering beneath. He knew he would cross it again before day's end, perhaps many times. And each crossing would be both the same and different, like leaves falling one after another, no two alike, yet all part of the same season. He smiled faintly to himself and resumed his walk toward the village square, the sound of his sandals fading into the hum of the waking day. Chapter 2: The Flowing River. The river beneath the stone bridge had always been there, or so it seemed to the people of the village. Its voice never ceased to murmur in spring when melted snow rushed from the mountains, a song in summer when rain swelled its banks. A whisper in autumn when leaves drifted down, and a hushed breath in winter when ice touched its edges. For Renji, it was as constant as the air he breathed, though it was never the same twice. That morning, after crossing into the village, he found himself drawn back to the bridge again, as if the river called to him. He retraced his steps, carrying no bundle this time, only his thoughts. By now the mist had thinned, and the sun's pale light rested gently upon the water. The surface shimmered, broken only by the steady drift of fallen leaves. Renji leaned against the railing once more and let his gaze wander downstream. The current was not swift, yet it carried everything with quiet determination: leaves, twigs, petals, and occasionally the reflection of a bird flying overhead. He wondered how far each leaf would go. Would it reach the sea? Would it sink before then? Did it matter? His fingers brushed a single red maple leaf caught between stones on the bridge. It trembled, trapped, before a breeze lifted it free. He watched it twirl, hover, and finally drop to the river below. For an instant, it floated proudly, its crimson brighter than the water itself, before the current claimed it. Renji's thoughts drifted with it. He remembered his wife, Aya, who had once stood beside him here in another autumn. They had watched leaves fall together, their shoulders touching lightly. She had said, "Each leaf has its own way of falling, don't you think? Some dance, some drift, some drop straight down." He had laughed then, teasing her for giving so much attention to leaves. Yet now, years later, he found himself remembering every word. Aya had been gone for 3 winters. The illness had taken her quickly, too quickly for him to understand. He had not spoken of her much since then, not even to his daughter, who had moved away to the city. But here, before the river, memory insisted on flowing back. Renji closed his eyes. He could almost hear Aya's voice mingling with the water, soft, persistent. He let the sound wash over him, neither clinging to it nor pushing it away. A heron landed on a rock in midstream, its long neck curved elegantly as it watched the water. The bird stood utterly still, patient, waiting for movement beneath the surface. Renji admired its calm, its discipline. When at last the heron struck, it emerged with a small fish glinting in its beak. Then it lifted off again, wings beating slowly, powerfully, until it vanished into the sky. The river absorbed all of this, the falling leaves, the bird's shadow, even Renji's silence. He felt, in that moment, that the river was not merely water but memory itself, gathering everything, carrying it onward. What the bridge held still, the river carried away. Between the two, life unfolded. Renji's reverie was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. He turned and saw a boy of perhaps 12 carrying a fishing pole and a small woven basket. The boy paused at the bridge, glanced at Renji, then looked down into the water. "Good morning," Renji said gently. The boy bowed his head shyly. "Good morning, sir. Going to fish?" The boy nodded. "Yes. My grandfather says the river is kind in autumn. The fish are slower." Renji smiled. "Your grandfather is right. I used to fish here too, when I was your age." The river has always been generous. The boy peered over the railing, eyes bright with anticipation. "Do you think the fish remember us, year after year?" It was such an innocent question that Renji chuckled softly. "Perhaps they remember the shape of shadows, the feel of stones. Perhaps they remember the way the water carries them. But whether they remember us, I cannot say." The boy considered this seriously before nodding. "Maybe the river remembers for them." Renji looked at him, surprised by the wisdom in such a simple statement. He nodded. "Yes. The river remembers." The boy thanked him politely and went down the bank to cast his line. Renji remained, watching the ripples spread across the water where the boy's float bobbed gently. It comforted him somehow, the sight of a new generation learning patience by the river's side. As the sun climbed higher, the light turned warmer, glinting off the surface in fragments of gold. Renji noticed how the shadows of the bridge's arches stretched across the water, dividing the river into patches of light and dark. It was as though the bridge, too, wished to leave its reflection, its memory, upon the current. He began to walk slowly along the length of the bridge, his hand trailing over the railing. Each stone was different, some rough, some smoothed by centuries of touch. The bridge carried not just people but also time itself. Generations had walked here, their steps layered one upon another. Farmers, travelers, children, lovers, all had left something of themselves, just as leaves left their trace upon the river. At the far end of the bridge, Renji turned once more to gaze back. The boy was still fishing, patient, quiet. The heron had returned to the rocks. Leaves continued to fall, some caught briefly in eddies, others carried swiftly away. The sight filled Renji with a deep sense of stillness, as though all of life could be contained within this simple interplay of stone, water, leaf, and air. He whispered, half to himself, if the river remembers, then perhaps we are never truly lost. The words vanished into the wind, carried away just as surely as the leaves. Yet Renji felt lighter. The river had taken his thought, as it took everything, and carried it onward. Chapter 3 Encounters. By midday, the village had awakened fully. Smoke rose from hearths, carrying the fragrance of miso soup and grilled fish. Children's laughter echoed faintly from beyond the hill. The stone bridge, however, remained a place of quiet passage, a threshold between bustle and calm. Renji lingered near its center, where he had always found the view most complete. It was there, leaning on the railing, that he noticed an old man approaching from the village side. The man wore a straw hat and carried a polished walking stick, smooth from years of use. His gait was deliberate but not weak, each step measured, like a poem written slowly. When their eyes met, the elder inclined his head. "Good day to you." "And to you," Renji replied, bowing slightly. The man stopped beside him and gazed over the railing at the drifting leaves. For a while, they stood together in silence, listening to the water. Then the elder said, "This bridge has seen many autumns. I have crossed it since I was a boy, and it remains unchanged. Yet every time, I feel it welcomes me anew." Renji nodded. "I know the feeling. It seems both eternal and fleeting, like the leaves themselves." The elder smiled faintly. "Yes. That is the way of things. Tell me, stranger, do you live in this village?" "I once did," Renji admitted. "Long ago. I have returned for a time." "Then you know its spirit," the elder said, tapping his stick gently against the stones. "This bridge holds our footsteps. It remembers them, just as the river remembers what it carries." Renji was struck by how the man's words echoed those of the boy earlier. He felt as though the bridge and river spoke through all who came to them, weaving generations together. The elder moved on slowly, his stick clicking softly against the stones. Renji watched him until he vanished into the path lined with maples. He thought of how many people the bridge had held in such moments, meetings, partings, wordless pauses. Not long after, a group of travelers appeared, their sandals dusty from the road. They carried bundles wrapped in cloth and wore expressions weary but content. At the center of the group was a woman humming an old song, her voice rising gently above the sound of the river. Renji listened as they passed. The melody was familiar, an autumn song once sung by farmers during harvest. Aya used to hum it while hanging persimmons to dry. For a moment, Renji's throat tightened, but instead of sorrow, he felt a gentle warmth, as though the song itself reminded him that life continued. The travelers paused at the far side of the bridge, admiring the river before moving on toward the village. Their voices faded into the distance, but the song lingered in Renji's mind, threading itself with memory. Later, as shadows lengthened, a small group of children came running, chasing each other across the bridge. Their laughter rang like bells, their bare feet quick against the stones. They carried sticks, pretending to be warriors or explorers. One boy stopped to wave at Renji before darting after his friends, his laughter trailing behind. Renji could not help but smile. The bridge seemed to transform under their energy, alive with play. Yet as the last echo of laughter disappeared, the calm returned, as steady as the river itself. He realized then that the bridge was never truly empty. Even when no one crossed, it carried all these moments, elder, traveler, child, within its silence. And he, too, had become part of that memory. Chapter 4: The Weight of Years. That evening, as dusk spread its indigo veil, Renji remained upon the bridge. Lanterns glowed faintly in the village, their reflections trembling upon the water. The air grew cool, carrying with it the fragrance of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Renji sat upon the low wall of the bridge, his hands resting on the stone worn smooth by countless seasons. He began to wonder how many years the bridge had endured, how many stories it contained. He imagined the past unfolding here centuries ago, when samurai rode across in armor. Their banners streaming behind them, villagers gathering in a festival, lanterns lining the railings, lovers meeting in secret, leaving only footprints and whispers. The stones beneath him had borne all of it. Each weight, each joy, each sorrow pressed into their surface. The bridge itself was a witness, impartial yet enduring. Renji thought of the wars his grandfather had spoken of, when soldiers marched through the valley and the bridge trembled beneath their boots. He imagined the cries, the fear, and then the return to silence once the army passed. The river would have carried away the echoes, but the bridge held the memory. Then he thought of festivals in autumn, when villagers lit lanterns and floated them down the river to honor ancestors. He remembered standing with Aya during one such festival, their daughter still small, clutching their hands. They had released a lantern together, watching it drift among hundreds of others, each flame a fragile star upon the current. Aya's face had glowed in that light, her smile serene. Renji's heart ached at the memory, but it was no longer sharp. Time, like the river, had softened it. What remained was not pain but gratitude that he had shared such moments upon this bridge, that Aya's smile had become part of its memory. The wind stirred, scattering leaves across the stones. Renji watched them settle, each leaf distinct in color and shape. Some would crumble quickly, others would remain, pressed flat by footsteps. Yet for a time, they all belonged to the bridge. He whispered to the stones, "You have carried us all. May you carry me a little longer." The bridge gave no reply, yet he felt comforted. It was enough to know that his life, too, was inscribed here, among so many others. The night deepened, and stars emerged one by one above the darkened hills. Renji rose, brushing off the dust of centuries from his hands, and made his way toward the village. The bridge lay quiet behind him, steadfast, timeless, its weight of years both solemn and gentle. Chapter 5: The Autumn Farewell. The days shortened quickly. Morning frost silvered the grasses by the river bank, and the air carried the sharpness of approaching winter. The maples, once brilliant, now stood bare, their branches like calligraphy strokes against the pale sky. What few leaves remained fluttered weakly, clinging to the season's last breath. Renji returned each day to the stone bridge, though the chill grew deeper. He wrapped his shoulders in a heavy cloak, the wool rough but warm, and leaned upon the railing to watch the final leaves drift downstream. The river seemed slower, as though the season's pulse had diminished. One evening, as twilight stretched long across the hills, Renji found himself alone upon the bridge. No travelers came, no children's laughter rang. Only the river's voice, hushed and patient, accompanied him. He stood in the fading light, struck by a quiet sorrow, not sharp grief, but the ache of farewell. He remembered Aya's final autumn, years ago, when she had stood with him at this very place. Her illness had already taken her strength, but she had insisted on visiting the bridge one last time. Together they had watched the lanterns drift on the river. Aya had whispered, "When I am gone, think of me here. I will always return with the leaves." Now, as Renji traced the memory, a lone crimson leaf tumbled from the bare branch above and landed on the railing before him. It quivered in the wind, delicate as breath, then slipped away into the current below. Renji closed his eyes. "Aya," he murmured, "you have kept your promise." The river shimmered in the dying light, carrying the leaf downstream until it vanished among shadows. That night, the first snowflakes began to fall, soft and silent. They landed upon the stones of the bridge, melting slowly into dark patches. Renji knew the season had turned. Autumn was gone. Yet as he stood beneath the falling snow, he did not feel despair. Instead, a deep stillness filled him, as if the bridge itself breathed with him, assuring him that nothing truly vanished. Leaves would return, as they always had. And with them, memory would blossom again. Epilogue: Eternal Bridge of Leaves. Winter claimed the valley, wrapping it in white silence. The river flowed on beneath sheets of ice, and the bridge lay cloaked in snow, its outlines softened like brushstrokes in ink-wash painting. Few crossed now, save for the occasional villager carrying firewood or a hunter returning from the hills. Renji left the village soon after the snow deepened, taking the old path down the valley road. But before he departed, he came to the bridge one last time. The stones, cold beneath his hand, seemed to pulse faintly with all the footsteps they had known. He whispered a farewell, though he understood now that leaving did not mean separation. The bridge had carried him, remembered him. His presence was woven into its silence, just as Aya's smile was, just as the laughter of children. The voices of travelers and the steps of ancestors all remained. Years later, when others came to cross, they too would add their moments. The bridge would hold them without judgment, without end, bearing witness as it always had. And every autumn, when the leaves returned and drifted upon the river, someone might pause upon the stones, gaze into the water, and feel an unspoken bond, an echo of those who had stood there before. The bridge would never speak, yet its silence would remain eloquent, a language of stone, river, and season. A language of law, harmony woven of presence and absence, of continuity and change. Far above, the sky opened, clouds parting to reveal a moon pale and eternal. Its light spilled across the snow and river, casting the bridge in silver. The stones glimmered, ageless, serene. And in that moment, it seemed that the autumn leaves still lingered not upon the branches, not upon the path, but within the heart of the bridge itself. Eternal, drifting, at peace. The hidden shrine among pines. Prologue. Pines in the mist. The mist came down from the mountains at dawn, soft and pale as woven silk, drifting low across the valley floor. It slid between the tall trunks of pine trees, wrapped itself around mossy stones, and lingered along the narrow paths that led toward the forest's heart. Ren, a quiet young man of the village below, walked with careful steps through that vale. His breath clouded in the chill, merging with the white air. In his hand, he carried no lantern, for the mist itself glowed faintly with the rising sun, scattering light into a dreamlike haze. The villagers seldom came this way anymore. They said the path was too overgrown, too easy to lose oneself in. Yet Ren had heard whispers from the elders. Half-stories told on winter nights of a hidden shrine among the pines, forgotten by most, but never truly gone. They spoke of it as though it were alive. A place where prayers once lingered on the wind, where the kami of the forest still waited, patient and unseen. Ren did not know why, on that particular morning, he felt the urge to seek it. Perhaps it was the dream that had woken him before dawn. A vision of pine needles glistening with dew, of a faint bell ringing far away, though no temple stood nearby. Or perhaps it was simply the longing in his heart, a quiet hunger for something beyond the rhythm of daily life. The path wound upward, and the mist thickened. Pines rose like pillars of a silent hall, their bark rough with age, their roots gnarled into the earth as though they had been guarding secrets for centuries. Above, crows stirred restlessly, their cries echoing in the hush. Ren paused. Ahead, beyond a curtain of fog, he thought he saw a shaped stone steps, half swallowed by moss, leading higher into the woods. He took a breath. The air smelled of resin and wet earth. And then, without another thought, he began to climb. Somewhere, hidden in the depths of the pines, the shrine awaited. Chapter 1: The Forgotten Path. The stone steps were worn and uneven, their edges softened by centuries of rain and footsteps now long vanished. Ferns spilled across them, and carpets of moss held the dew as though they were guarding jewels of morning light. Each step Wren took felt less like entering a forest and more like crossing into memory itself. Birdsong was faint here, replaced by the low rustle of pine needles shifting in the wind. The world seemed reduced to three colors: the deep green of the trees, the gray of stone, and the white shroud of mist. Wren's heart beat steadily, and yet with each pace he felt he was intruding upon something sacred. Halfway up the slope, the path narrowed, pressed by the roots of two immense pines that had grown together, their trunks forming an arch. Passing beneath, Wren instinctively bowed his head, as though crossing the threshold of a gate. Beyond, the air grew stiller, almost heavy. There were signs that once, long ago, this had been a place of devotion. A stone lantern leaned at an angle, its top cracked and laced with lichen. A fragment of rope shimanawa clung to a tree, frayed and faded but still bearing shreds of white paper streamers. Wren reached out, brushing his fingers across the weathered fibers. The rope crumbled at his touch, but in that instant, he felt something stir within him, not fear, but a solemn awareness, as though unseen eyes had turned to regard him. He bowed, murmuring, "Excuse me for entering." The forest accepted his words with silence. Yet the silence was not empty. It was full, layered with the soundless breath of centuries, the residue of countless prayers whispered here by those who had come before. The steps continued upward. Mist drifted between the trunks, thinning at moments to reveal glimpses of the slope above. Wren climbed steadily, his breath growing heavier, his legs aching with the ascent. Still, something urged him on. At last, the path leveled, and the trees opened into a clearing. The mist lay pooled like water, and from its depths rose the shape of a torii gate. Its wood was dark with age, streaked with moss, yet it stood upright, resolute, as though no time had passed. Pine needles blanketed the ground around it, and the silence here deepened, resonant like the pause between drumbeats. Wren stopped at the edge of the clearing. His chest rose and fell quickly, his breath loud in his ears. He felt both drawn and hesitant, like one standing at the edge of a river whose depth he could not see. Beyond the torii, the faint outline of a shrine emerged. Its roof was sagging with the weight of years, its eaves draped with cobwebs, but even so, it radiated a quiet dignity. Wren stepped forward. Passing beneath the torii, he felt a chill run through him, though the air did not change. It was as though he had crossed into another realm, not separate from the world he knew, but layered upon it, hidden in plain sight. The shrine was small, its wooden beams rough but carefully joined, its doors closed yet not locked. Before it stood a weathered offertory box, its slats filled with fallen needles. Wren bowed deeply. The movement came naturally, almost instinctively, as though guided by a memory older than himself. When he raised his head, a pine cone dropped from the branches above, landing with a soft thud upon the earth beside him. He looked up. The trees swayed gently, though no wind moved. And in that quiet moment, Ren knew the shrine was not abandoned. It had only been waiting. Chapter 2 Whispers of Kami. Ren lingered before the small shrine, his breath slowing as he tried to quiet the quick rhythm of his heart. The clearing was still, yet it did not feel empty. The pines loomed close, their branches weaving overhead into a vaulted canopy that seemed as much a roof as the aged wooden beams of the shrine itself. He lowered himself to his knees, brushing aside pine needles to clear a space before the offertory box. There was no coin to give, yet instinct told him an offering was required. He set down instead a small folded piece of paper, blank except for the warmth of his hand, as though the act of giving itself was enough. Closing his eyes, he pressed his palms together. The forest held its breath. For a moment, all he heard was the distant drip of dew falling from a branch, the faint creak of trees shifting in the mist. But as silence stretched, another sound emerged, subtle, almost indistinct, like a murmur carried by the wind. A whisper. Ren's eyes opened. The shrine's wooden doors remained closed, its weathered grain unchanging. Yet the whispering continued, weaving between the trees, threading through the mist. It was not a single voice but many, layered like ripples upon water. The words were not clear. They were half-heard syllables, as if spoken in a tongue older than his own, yet the meaning pressed into him like the weight of unseen hands. "We are here." Ren's heart quickened. He bowed once more, deeper this time. "Forgive me for disturbing you," he whispered. His own voice sounded small against the hushed air. "I wished only to see the shrine." The whispering subsided, fading like the retreat of waves across a shore. Then came a hush even deeper than before, and within it Ren sensed something: approval, or perhaps acknowledgement. The pines swayed gently. Their needles brushed one another in a sound like sighing breath. A single shaft of sunlight pierced the mist and fell across the torii gate, illuminating the moss at its base. Ren felt warmth spread through him, a quiet reassurance that he was not unwelcome. He sat back on his heels, gazing at the shrine. It was simple, weathered, yet dignified. How many years had it stood here, tended once by hands long gone? What prayers had been carried into its wood, and what promises bound to the spirits dwelling within? He could almost imagine the place alive with festival lanterns. Voices of villagers echoing with laughter, the sharp sound of taiko drums resonating among the trees. Now only silence remained, but within that silence was presence, an invisible thread binding past to present. Ren stayed until the mist began to lift, revealing more of the clearing. Birds returned, timidly at first, then with brighter notes. Somewhere deeper in the forest, water gurgled faintly, perhaps a hidden spring. When he finally rose, he bowed once more to the shrine. "I will return," he said quietly. As he stepped back beneath the torii, a breeze stirred, carrying the soft fragrance of pine resin. It was as though the kami had breathed in reply. Chapter 3: The Villager's Tale. The path down felt shorter than the climb, though Ren walked slowly, glancing often over his shoulder as though reluctant to leave. By the time he emerged from the pines, the mist had thinned to wisps, drifting above the fields of the valley. The village below was stirring smoke rising from hearths, roosters crowing in uneven chorus, women calling to children. Ren's own home was a small wooden house at the edge of the village, near a brook. But before returning, he stopped at the house of Elder Sojin, the oldest man of the valley, whose memory stretched farther than any other. The elder sat outside on the veranda, wrapped in a faded indigo robe, a pipe resting between his fingers. His back was bent, but his eyes remained keen, sharp as the winter stars. He looked up as Ren approached, and a slow smile creased his face. "You've been in the pines," Sojin said, his voice gravelly. Ren started. "How did you?" The elder tapped his pipe against the railing, scattering a few ashes. "The forest clings to you. I can smell the resin on your sleeves." Ren sat and bowed his head respectfully. After a moment, he spoke. "I found something. A shrine. Hidden among the trees." Sojin's eyes narrowed slightly, though not in surprise. "So you've seen it?" Ren hesitated. "You know of it, then?" "Of course." The elder drew on his pipe, exhaling a thin curl of smoke that rose and mingled with the morning air. "That shrine is older than this village. Older than my grandfather, and his grandfather before him. Some say it was built in an age when the mountains still spoke aloud." Ren leaned forward. "But why is it hidden? Why do people not go there anymore?" Sojin's gaze drifted toward the distant line of the pines. His voice softened. "Once, it was the heart of our festivals. Each autumn, we carried lanterns up that path, offered rice and sake to the spirits, and danced beneath the trees. The kami were honored, and the harvest was plentiful. But times changed. Families left for towns. Roads shifted. The younger ones forgot." He tapped the pipe again, slower this time. "And so the shrine waited. It waits still. For one who remembers." Ren felt the weight of those words settle upon him. He recalled the whispers in the clearing, the sense of unseen eyes watching, the breath of wind that had seemed almost like a reply. "Do you believe the spirits are still there?" he asked quietly. Sojin's gaze sharpened once more. "Believe?" He gave a short, low laugh. "Boy, the spirits do not vanish because we forget them. It is we who vanish, while they endure. The question is not whether they remain, but whether we choose to listen." Ren lowered his eyes, the elder's words echoing within him. Sojin leaned back, pipe set aside. "If you return, go with respect. Do not ask for gifts. Bring only sincerity. That is what binds us to the kami, not offerings of gold." Ren bowed deeply. "I understand." The elder nodded. "Then perhaps the shrine will teach you what it has guarded all these years." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant clatter of a cart on the village road. The morning sun had risen fully now, burning away the mist, but in Ren's heart lingered the cool hush of the pines, the whispers of voices older than memory. Chapter 4: The Festival of Pines. The weeks passed, and autumn deepened. The hillsides blazed with maple and ginkgo, their crimson and gold reflected in the river that wound through the valley. Each evening, as shadows lengthened, Ren found his thoughts wandering back to the hidden shrine. He returned often, sometimes with offerings of rice, sometimes with nothing but the quiet rhythm of his breath. Word of his visits reached the elder Sojin, and through him, the rest of the village. One evening, as villagers gathered to prepare for the harvest festival, Sojin spoke. "The shrine waits for us still," he said, his voice carrying over the clatter of tools and chatter. "Perhaps it is time we remembered it, if only for one night." The villagers looked at one another, uncertain. Many had never even seen the shrine for them, it was more legend than place. But respect for the elder was strong, and curiosity stirred among them. So it was agreed when the harvest was gathered, a procession would climb the forgotten path. Lanterns would be lit, drums would sound, and offerings would be laid once more before the pine-bound shrine. The night of the festival arrived with clear skies and a crisp chill. The moon rose round and pale above the valley, silvering the thatched roofs of houses. Children carried paper lanterns painted with cranes and flowing water, their light flickering like fireflies. Women in bright festival robes tied sashes at their waists, while men beat drums that echoed across the fields. Ren walked near the front of the procession, carrying a small tray of rice cakes. His heart swelled with anticipation. Though he had visited the shrine alone many times, tonight it would not be silent. Tonight, it would remember the warmth of many voices. The path through the pines glowed with the wavering light of lanterns. Shadows leapt upon the trunks, and the scent of resin thickened as the villagers climbed. Some whispered nervously, as though afraid to wake something long asleep. Others laughed softly, their breath white in the cool night. When at last they reached the clearing, a hush fell. The shrine stood waiting, solemn beneath the pines, its weathered wood bathed in moonlight. For many, it was the first sight of the sacred place, and awe spread silently through the gathering. Elder Sojin stepped forward, leaning heavily on his cane. He bowed low, his voice carrying as he spoke. "We have come again, though late. Forgive our absence. Tonight we return, with gratitude for the harvest, with respect for the spirits of this place." The villagers followed, bowing in unison. Offerings were laid: rice, sake, persimmons, bundles of chestnuts. The air seemed to thrum softly, as though unseen hands stirred the branches above. Then the drums began, slow at first, then rising into a steady rhythm that filled the clearing. Children danced in circles, their lanterns swinging. Women clapped in time, their sleeves swaying like wings. Voices rose in song, old words that few still understood, but whose melody was etched in memory. Ren felt the presence of the shrine swell around them, as though the kami themselves leaned close, listening. The air shimmered faintly, and a breeze rushed through the pines, though no storm moved across the sky. Lantern flames wavered but did not go out. For a moment, Ren thought he saw figures among the trees' shapes clothed in pale light, watching with stillness beyond human. He blinked, and the vision faded, but the sense of being seen remained. The festival continued until the moon tilted westward and the air grew colder. Slowly, the villagers gathered their things, bowing once more before turning back. The clearing emptied, lantern light fading down the path. Ren lingered, standing alone before the shrine. "Thank you," he whispered, "for accepting us again." The pines whispered back, their sighs weaving through the cold night air. Chapter 5: A Winter of Silence. Snow came early that year. The mountains wore crowns of white, and frost rimmed the edges of the fields. The villagers huddled by their hearths, smoke rising thick and straight into the still air. Ren continued his visits to the shrine, though the climb grew harder as the path vanished beneath snow. He carried food offerings wrapped in cloth, leaving them before the wooden doors. Sometimes he lit a small candle, its flame flickering against the winter dusk. The forest in snow was unlike any other place, silent, crystalline, vast. Each step crunched beneath his boots, and his breath billowed before him like smoke. The pines bore heavy loads of snow, their branches bending yet unbroken. The shrine stood unchanged, austere and waiting. One afternoon, as Ren knelt before the shrine, he felt the silence deepen, pressing against him like the weight of a heavy blanket. The air grew colder, sharper. His breath froze mid-air, hanging in an unnatural stillness. Then he heard it, not the whispers of many voices as before, but a single clear tone, low and resonant. It was like the ring of a temple bell, though no bell hung in the clearing. The sound seemed to vibrate through the air, through the trees, through Ren himself. His chest ached with it, as if the note had struck within his own heart. "Endure," the voice seemed to say. "The winter tests all things. So must you be tested." Ren bowed his head, trembling. "I will endure," he whispered. The sound faded, leaving only the silence of falling snow. Days passed into weeks. Storms swept the valley, winds howling across the roofs, drifts piling high against doors. Ren's journeys grew more difficult, yet he continued. Sometimes he sank to his knees in the snow, exhausted, but the memory of the shrine's presence drove him on. The villagers noticed. Some shook their heads, saying he risked too much. Others murmured that perhaps the kami themselves had chosen him. Elder Sojin simply smiled when asked, his eyes reflecting the glow of the hearth. Ren himself felt no certainty, only a deep resolve. Each offering he laid before the shrine, each bow in the snow-laden silence, seemed less about duty and more about becoming part of something greater, an unbroken thread between forest, spirit, and man. And slowly, he began to feel that the silence was no longer empty. It held him, supported him, like the vast stillness of the pines themselves. Chapter 6 Renewal in Spring. Winter loosened its grip slowly, reluctantly. At first, only the faintest trickle of water could be heard beneath the ice, and the brittle crust of snow gave way underfoot. Then came the cry of returning birds, shrill and insistent against the silence. Wren stood once more upon the mountain path. The snow was thinning now, exposing patches of brown earth and the first shoots of green. Each day he climbed, his heart lighter, though his body bore the memory of many struggles. The shrine awaited him as always, unchanged yet somehow different beneath the light of spring. Meltwater dripped from the eaves, forming tiny rivulets that caught the sunlight. The pines released a scent both sharp and sweet, renewed by thaw. Wren bowed deeply before the wooden doors. For the first time in months, he smiled as he placed his offering fresh greens from the first sprouts in the village gardens. A breeze stirred, warm and alive. The silence that had weighed so heavily in winter now lifted, replaced by a gentle murmur of life. The forest seemed to breathe again, and Wren felt himself breathing with it. That evening, the villagers gathered by the fields. Elder Sojin raised his hand for quiet, his voice calm but carrying strength. "This winter has tested us all," he said. "But look, the earth returns, and so do we. Let us not forget the shrine that endured with us." The people nodded. Some smiled at Wren, whose devotion had become known to them. He bowed his head modestly, feeling no pride, only gratitude. In the days that followed, paths were cleared, seeds planted, and life began again. Wren continued his visits to the shrine, no longer burdened with the heaviness of solitude. Each step felt part of a larger rhythm, the same rhythm that turned snow into streams, and buds into blossoms. One morning, Wren awoke to find the village buzzing with excitement. A group of travelers had arrived, carrying goods from distant provinces. Among them was a priest, draped in white and saffron robes, who asked about the hidden shrine. Wren led him through the pines. The priest walked in silence, his eyes taking in each detail of the path. When they reached the clearing, he stopped, folding his hands in reverence. "This place is blessed," he said softly. "Few shrines still hold such stillness, such purity. It is as though the kami have guarded it from the world." Wren felt a warmth in his chest at the words. The priest offered prayers, then turned to him. "You have tended this place well," he said. "Not all shrines survive neglect, yet here it remains strong. The spirits will remember your devotion." Wren bowed, humbled. "I only wished to keep it alive." The priest nodded. "And by doing so, you have kept more than wood and stone alive. You have kept the bond between people and spirit unbroken." Spring deepened. The fields are filled with the green of young rice, swaying under the mountain winds. At night, frogs croaked from the paddies, their chorus rising like a prayer. Lanterns once again lit the streets, not for a festival but for everyday joy, and children ran laughing through the dusk. Ren often found himself watching it all, the living cycle of the village, the slow breathing of the forest, the eternal presence of the shrine. He realized then that the shrine was not merely a place apart from life, but at its very center. Woven into every moment of planting, of harvesting, of simply being. Epilogue: Eternal pines, eternal shrine. Years passed, and the hidden shrine remained. The villagers no longer forgot it. Each season brought offerings, each festival a procession beneath the pines. Children who once carried lanterns grew into adults who bowed with reverence before the weathered doors. Ren grew older, too, his hair touched with gray, his steps slower on the mountain path. Yet his visits never ceased. The shrine had become part of him, as natural as breath. One quiet evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains and the pines cast long shadows, Ren knelt once more before the shrine. The air was filled with the scent of earth and resin, the soft call of night birds, and the hum of unseen life. He closed his eyes, and in the silence he heard it again, the faintest whisper, the echo of all the voices that had filled the clearing in years past. Not a command, not even words, but a presence that embraced him. The shrine did not belong to him, nor he to it. They belonged together, bound by time, by devotion, by the unbroken rhythm of the seasons. When Ren rose and turned back toward the village, the shrine stood behind him in its eternal stillness, watching. The pines swayed gently in the evening breeze, their song carrying into the valley below. And so it would remain, hidden yet eternal, the heart of the forest, the soul of the village. The hidden shrine among pines. The morning mist over the temple. Prologue: Dawn in the mist. The mist lay thick upon the valley at first light, a silver-gray veil that shrouded the temple perched on the mountainside. Ren, a young traveler from the village below, approached the sacred place with careful steps, each crunch of his straw sandals softened by the wet earth. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the scent of pine resin and damp moss. A faint bird call echoed through the haze, only to vanish before he could recognize its source. Every tree, every stone, seemed softened by the mist, and the temple loomed ahead like a vision from a dream. Ren had heard of this temple since childhood, stories of monks who walked silently through the halls, of bells that rang through the valley at dawn, and of an eternal mist that appeared only to those who truly sought stillness. The elders in the village spoke of it with reverence, as though merely naming it would awaken its spirit. He paused at the edge of the path, his eyes tracing the outlines of the stone steps that disappeared upward into the fog. The path seemed alive, each curve and incline holding the memory of countless pilgrims who had walked before him. A thin thread of sunlight struggled to pierce the mist, illuminating droplets upon pine needles like scattered jewels. Ren drew a deep breath, feeling the chill of the morning fill his lungs. This was a place apart from time, where the rhythm of the world slowed to the whisper of the wind through the trees. And somewhere beyond the mist, the temple waited silent, patient, eternal. With a final glance toward the village below, he stepped forward. Chapter 1: The Stone Steps. The path to the temple climbed steadily, winding through thick pines whose roots twisted over stones, moss, and soil alike. Each step Ren took felt heavier, not from the slope, but from the sense of history pressing against him. Every rock, every root seemed to carry the imprint of those who had walked here before: monks, pilgrims, villagers, travelers, each leaving a trace now invisible yet still present. The mist swirled around his ankles and knees, sometimes curling upward like smoke. The scent of wet pine and earth filled his senses, grounding him even as the world beyond the trees seemed to vanish. Halfway up, Ren came upon a stone lantern, its top cracked and leaning slightly. Moss and lichen clung to it like clothing of green and gray, and water had pooled in its hollow, reflecting the soft light of dawn. He bent to touch it, tracing the worn edges with a finger. The stone was cool, damp, and strangely alive, as though it remembered every hand that had once rested upon it. A sudden breeze rustled the pines, shaking droplets onto the path. Ren closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the whispered language of wind and needle. It seemed to say, "Keep walking. You are not alone." Further up, the steps became steeper, and the mist thickened into a veil so dense that he could barely see the top. Yet he felt drawn onward, each footfall an affirmation of trust. Shadows of trees stretched across the stones, forming fleeting shapes that vanished as soon as he blinked. After what felt like hours, though it was only a short climb, Ren reached a clearing. The mist parted here, revealing the temple in its entirety. Its wooden beams were dark and weathered, the roof sagging slightly under centuries of rain and snow. Yet it radiated dignity and calm, a presence that seemed to embrace the surrounding forest. He stood at the foot of the steps leading to the main hall. Moss-covered stones formed uneven risers, each step softened by years of rain and countless feet. He could feel the pulse of history beneath his palms as he rested them on the railing, polished smooth by devotion and passage. The temple seemed to breathe, as if acknowledging his arrival. Somewhere beyond the mist, a bell rang a deep, resonant note that rolled through the valley and back, echoing in the quiet air. It was not a sound of alarm, nor a summons, but a gentle welcome, a reminder that this place held both stillness and life. Ren bowed, lowering his hands to his sides. Though no one was present, he felt the eyes of the temple upon him, not judging, but observing, as the forest and stone had observed countless generations before. He stepped onto the stone risers, moving slowly, each step an offering. The air was crisp, scented with pine and damp wood. Light began to filter through the mist, falling upon the temple's wooden doors, illuminating carved patterns that had faded over time. The carvings depicted cranes, waves, and pine branches, a tapestry of nature, etched into permanence. At the top, Ren paused again, breathing deeply. He had crossed the threshold of the mundane world into one that was both sacred and intimate, where mist, stone, and wood held together in harmonious stillness. He whispered, almost to himself, "I have come." The temple did not answer, yet the rustle of the trees, the distant bell, the soft stir of the mist seemed enough. It was as if the entire forest waited in gentle acknowledgement of his presence. Ren stepped forward toward the main hall, the floorboards creaking faintly under his weight. Every sound echoed through the space, yet the sound did not disturb. It was absorbed, carried by the walls, the pillars, the very air itself, and returned as a sense of deep peace. He knelt before the offertory box, empty of coins yet full of intent. He placed his palms together, eyes closed, feeling the slow rhythm of breath and thought. In the stillness, he heard it again, the whisper of wind, the brush of pine needles, the distant echo of the bell. The temple was alive, not in the sense of motion, but in presence. And Ren, sitting on the cold wooden floor, understood that this moment, too, would become part of the living history of the temple. He rose, moving to the veranda. The mist swirled around him, sunlight breaking through in silver shafts. Below, the valley lay hidden, shrouded in cloud. Above, the pines swayed, their shadows shifting across the temple grounds. Ren took a deep breath. He had arrived, but this was only the beginning. The morning mist over the temple held secrets he had yet to discover, lessons he had yet to learn. And in the quiet, eternal rhythm of the forest and stone, he felt the first stirrings of a journey that would span seasons, carrying him into the heart of a world both sacred and enduring. Chapter 2: The Bell Awakens. The first light of morning had fully spread across the valley, and yet the mist clung to the temple grounds. Swirling around the stone lanterns and the base of the pine trees like drifting clouds. Ren walked slowly to the temple's main hall, his footsteps muted against the wooden floor of the veranda. A low vibration drew his attention upward. From the belfry, the temple bell had begun to sound. The note was deep and resonant, its timbre carrying across the mist-shrouded forest. Each strike rolled through the valley and returned, softened by distance and cloud, until it seemed to surround the temple in a halo of sound. Ren closed his eyes and listened. The bell's voice was both a summons and a reassurance, marking the rhythm of the day, the cycle of time. It reminded him that the temple was alive, not in movement, but in presence, enduring, patient, and watchful. He opened his eyes to see the monks slowly emerging from the main hall. Their robes, dyed in muted shades of indigo and brown, moved like liquid shadows through the mist. They carried no words, only intention and ritual, each gesture deliberate and calm. One monk, older than the others, paused and looked at Ren. His eyes, though kind, held a depth that seemed to see beyond the body and into the spirit itself. "You have come at dawn," the monk said softly, his voice blending with the faint whisper of the wind. "The bell has awakened you." Ren bowed. "I wished to see the temple at morning, to feel the mist and to listen." The monk nodded. "Then you have chosen well. The bell speaks, but only those who are still enough will hear its lessons." Ren watched as the monks moved with quiet grace, lighting incense and arranging small offerings of rice and flowers. The aroma of burning incense mingled with the scent of pine and wet earth, creating a fragrance that seemed to exist beyond description, both earthly and sacred. He knelt beside the offertory box, feeling the texture of the wood beneath his fingers. Though he had no coin to place, he folded his hands and closed his eyes, letting the resonance of the bell and the presence of the monks guide his thoughts. The bell rang again, and in its echo, Ren imagined the passing of centuries, the countless monks, pilgrims, and villagers who had bowed here before him. Each sound was a thread, linking him to the rhythm of the temple, the forest, and the valley itself. Chapter 3: Stories of the Monks. After the morning ritual, Ren lingered while the monks retired to their quarters. One of the younger monks approached him, carrying a small scroll tied with a red string. "You have questions," the monk said, more statement than inquiry. Ren nodded. "I want to understand why the temple endures, why it is hidden in the mist, and why the bell rings for those who listen." The monk led him to the edge of the veranda, where the valley spread below like a painting, still half concealed by mist. He spoke softly, the words measured and careful. "This temple was founded long ago, at a time when the mountains were wilder and the forests deeper. It was built not to dominate the land, but to harmonize with it. The bell you hear calls to all who enter the forest. It awakens the heart, reminding those who come that they are part of a greater whole." Ren listened, captivated. "And the mist? It is both shield and guide," the monk replied. "It hides the temple from those who are not prepared to walk its path, yet reveals it fully to those whose hearts are open. The mist itself is part of the teaching. It is patience. It is stillness. It is the soft veil between the known and the unknown." The monk unrolled the scroll, revealing delicate brushwork depicting pine trees, mountains, and the temple perched above them. In the margins were faint inscriptions, poems, prayers, and notes from monks long gone. "Each monk adds his voice to the temple," the monk said. "Even in silence, the temple grows with each presence, each step, each bow. The bell calls not to the body, but to the soul. It reminds us that our time here is fleeting, and yet part of an endless flow." Ren traced the brushstrokes with his finger, feeling the texture of the ink. "I have felt it," he said. "The presence. The stillness. The connection to everything around me." The monk smiled faintly. "Then you have heard the temple's voice. Now you must walk its lessons. Watch, listen, and learn. The forest, the mist, the bell, they will guide you if you are patient." He paused, glancing toward the distant peaks where sunlight was breaking through the clouds. Remember, the temple is not only a place of worship. It is a mirror. It reflects the soul of each who comes, revealing what lies within. Ren nodded, absorbing the weight of the words. For the first time, the mist did not seem mysterious or concealing. It felt protective, like the temple itself was sheltering him until he could understand its teachings. As the monks retreated into their quarters, Ren remained on the veranda. The bell's echo faded into the valley, leaving only the soft rustle of pine needles in the breeze. In the quiet, he felt a profound connection not only to the temple, but to the enduring rhythm of nature and the cycles of life it upheld. He realized that the temple was more than stone and wood. It was memory, presence, and devotion incarnate. It was a living testament to patience, humility, and harmony, the very essence of Wa. And in the morning mist, Ren understood that his journey had only begun. Chapter 4: Lanterns and Morning Chants. Spring had given way to summer, yet the mornings remained draped in mist, soft and cool as silk. The temple was alive with preparations for the annual morning lantern ceremony. A tradition carried out to honor the spirits of the mountain and the ancestors of the temple. Ren arrived before dawn, carrying a small paper lantern he had folded and painted himself. He followed the stone path to the veranda, where monks were already arranging incense, preparing candles, and checking the brass fittings of the larger lanterns. The air was rich with the mingling scents of burning incense and pine resin. The mist moved like liquid silver through the temple grounds, curling around pillars and trees. The soft drip of water from the temple roof punctuated the quiet, like a delicate drumbeat keeping time with the heart of the morning. The elder monk, observing the preparations, beckoned Ren closer. "You will light the first lantern," he said. "Let its flame guide the others, as intention guides the heart." Ren knelt before the small lantern, lighting its candle with careful hands. The flame wavered in the mist, casting a golden glow on the nearby stones. As he lifted it, carrying it slowly toward the main courtyard, he noticed how the mist caught the light, scattering it in 100 tiny reflections. Around him, villagers and other temple attendants began placing lanterns along the path, atop stone walls, and at the foot of the pine trees. The mist created a dreamlike corridor of floating lights, illuminating the way for the monks and visitors. A chant began, low and melodic, rising in harmony with the flickering lanterns. The words were ancient, and though Ren did not understand them fully, he felt the rhythm resonate through his body and soul. The temple seemed to pulse with the chant, the light, and the mist, as if the forest and stone itself were participating. Ren moved slowly among the lanterns, ensuring each flame burned steadily. He realized that this ritual was not just a spectacle of beauty, it was a communion. Each flicker of candlelight, each whispered syllable, bound the living and the sacred, the present and the memory of all who had come before. By the time the sun began to pierce the mist, the courtyard was aglow with hundreds of lanterns, their light mingling with the morning fog. Ren paused at the top of the steps, gazing across the scene, and understood that the temple was a bridge between heaven and earth, past and present, spirit and man. Chapter 5 Winter Silence. The seasons changed quickly in the mountains, and before long, snow fell, blanketing the temple grounds in silence. Ren trudged along the path, now covered with icy layers and frost-laden pines. The wind bit at his cheeks, and the snow muffled every sound, making the forest feel immense and eternal. Despite the harsh cold, Ren continued his visits to the temple, bringing small offerings of dried fruits and tea leaves. He would kneel before the main hall, bowing deeply, and sit in quiet meditation, listening to the wind, the shifting snow, and the occasional echo of a distant temple bell. The silence of winter was different from the mist of spring. It was heavier, more demanding. It challenged him to confront his own impatience, his fears, and his doubts. Many times, he thought of turning back, of returning to the warmth and safety of the village. Yet each time, the presence of the temple, the whispers of pine needles, and the memory of lantern light called him forward. One evening, as the sun set behind snow-capped peaks, Ren heard a deep, resonant note, a bell, though the belfry remained empty. The sound seemed to vibrate through the frozen earth, through his own chest. It was a reminder that the temple endured, that the spirits watched, and that he, too, must endure. He bowed deeply in the snow, feeling the cold seeping into his bones but refusing to leave his resolve. The winter, harsh and silent, had become a teacher. In its stillness, he learned patience. In its cold, he found clarity. Days passed, weeks melted into months, and slowly, the snow receded. Ren's heart felt lighter. He had faced the winter silence and found strength in the rhythm of the temple, the forest, and the seasons. As spring approached, he noticed the first buds on the pine trees, the faint trickle of melted snow forming small streams, and the soft return of bird calls. The temple seemed to awaken, its stones glistening with new moisture, its wooden beams warm under the sunlight. Ren smiled, understanding that the cycle of the seasons, the rhythm of the temple, and the patience of the forest were intertwined, teaching him that devotion was not only in action but in presence, endurance, and quiet reflection. Chapter 6 Spring Reverie. Winter had passed, leaving the temple grounds glistening with melted snow and fresh green shoots. The mist returned each morning, softer now, weaving around the pines like a delicate veil. Ren felt a sense of completion as he ascended the stone steps, the wooden railings warm under his hands after months of frost. The temple seemed to breathe with the season. Buds unfolded on pine branches, streams trickled more boldly, and the sunlight filtered through the mist in golden threads. Ren carried offerings of tea leaves and blossoms, placing them before the main hall with careful hands. The monks gathered at dawn, performing their morning chants. The melody rose and fell, blending with birdsong and the murmur of streams, creating a harmony that seemed to resonate with the very earth. Ren knelt quietly, letting the rhythm of life and ritual wash over him. He realized that the temple was not simply a place of worship, it was a living entity, connected to every leaf, stone, and breath of wind. The seasons moved through it as naturally as through the forest itself. And in attending to the temple, he had become part of this eternal flow. One morning, Ren found the valley below bathed in mist that shimmered with sunlight. Villagers were tending their fields, and children's laughter drifted upward. The temple, perched among the pines, seemed to watch over all of it, as it always had. An elder monk approached Ren, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You have endured," he said. "You have learned that stillness is strength, patience is wisdom, and presence is devotion. The temple has spoken, and you have listened." Ren bowed deeply, feeling humility and gratitude intertwine. "I have learned more than I could have imagined," he whispered. The monk nodded. "And so the temple endures, through winter and spring, mist and sunlight, because those who listen carry its spirit forward." Epilogue. Eternal mist. Eternal temple. Years passed. The temple continued to stand among the pines, its wooden beams weathered yet dignified, its stones moss-covered yet unbroken. The mist returned each morning, silent, protective, and eternal. Ren grew older, his hair streaked with gray, but his devotion never wavered. He continued to visit the temple, tending to the paths, lighting lanterns, and bowing before the offertory box. Children he had once guided in morning chants now carried lanterns of their own, learning the rhythms of the temple and the forest. He watched as the seasons cycled endlessly: spring buds, summer rains, autumn leaves, winter snows, and understood that the temple was not only a place, but a presence, linking past and future, spirit and humanity, silence and song. One morning, as the mist rose from the valley, Ren knelt once more on the veranda. Listening to the soft rustle of pines, the distant song of birds, and the faint echo of the bell, he felt the temple's eternal heartbeat, steady and patient, and knew that he was part of its living memory. The temple would remain, hidden in the mist, eternal and enduring, a sanctuary where the harmony of nature, human devotion, and the sacred converged. Ren rose, looking out over the valley. The mist shimmered in the morning light, and he felt the calm certainty that the temple, like the pines themselves, would continue its silent watch over all who sought it. And so it stood, serene, eternal, a testament to patience, devotion, and the enduring spirit of Wa. Reflections beneath the cherry blossoms. Prologue. Petals in the morning. The first light of dawn spread softly over the village, bathing the cherry trees lining the riverbank in a gentle pink glow. Petals drifted through the air like snow, carried on a breeze that smelled of damp earth and new spring growth. Ren walked slowly beneath the blossoms, his straw sandals brushing the fallen petals scattered across the path. Each step released a subtle rustle, the sound absorbed quickly by the quiet morning. The river beside him shimmered, reflecting the soft pink canopy above, broken only by the occasional ripple from a passing fish. He paused, lifting a hand to catch a drifting petal. It settled on his palm, fragile and fleeting, as though reminding him that all things were impermanent. The village beyond the trees was just beginning to stir chimneys smoke. Curling lazily into the sky, the faint sounds of chickens, and the distant call of a monk's bell. Wren's gaze wandered upward. The cherry blossoms seemed endless, a delicate bridge connecting the earth to the sky. In that moment, the world felt suspended between past and present, memory and anticipation. He breathed deeply, allowing the fragrance and the sight to fill him, to calm him. This path, this morning, was more than a simple walk. It was an entry into the rhythm of life that flowed around the village, through the river, beneath the petals, and into the hearts of those who walked it. He stepped forward again, feeling the gentle tug of purpose, the desire to understand, to witness, and to become part of this fleeting harmony. Chapter 1: The River's Reflection. Wren reached the edge of the riverbank where the water widened, forming a small pool that reflected the morning sky and the swaying branches above. He knelt to touch the surface, watching the petals that floated there, turning in circles as if dancing. The reflection was both real and dreamlike, a mirror that seemed to hold more than the visible world. Wren felt as though he could step into it, merge with the river, and drift beneath the blossoms themselves. Each ripple distorted and reshaped the scene, reminding him that life was constant movement, yet beauty remained in every fleeting shape. Villagers began their work along the fields farther upstream. He watched them planting rice seedlings, their careful hands moving in rhythm with the flow of the water. It was a quiet choreography, each motion both deliberate and graceful, echoing the slow, persistent movement of the river beneath his gaze. A breeze rose, sending a cascade of petals onto the surface. Wren extended a hand, letting one settle on his palm before it floated away. It struck him that the river was a keeper of memory, carrying the history of the village, of those who had planted, harvested, prayed, and loved along its banks. He rose and followed the river, stepping carefully over moss-covered stones. Here, the cherry trees leaned over the water, their branches forming arches that filtered the morning light into dappled patterns. Shadows and petals mingled, creating a moving tapestry on the surface of the river. Wren paused, letting the scene imprint itself upon his mind, each detail a lesson in mindfulness and presence. The path curved toward a small wooden bridge. The boards creaked softly under his weight, the sound blending with the whisper of water and the rustle of leaves. From the middle of the bridge, Wren looked down at the river. He saw the reflection of the sky, the blossoms, and himself, all merged into one. A sense of quiet joy rose within him. The river did not distinguish between the past and present, it carried all things together, as if every moment could exist simultaneously. He leaned on the railing, watching petals swirl in small eddies, catching on branches or floating out of sight. Somewhere nearby, a bird sang, its notes rising above the murmur of the river and the subtle movement of the trees. Ren closed his eyes, listening. In that song, he recognized the continuity of life, the unseen thread connecting the river, the blossoms, the villagers, and himself. When he opened his eyes again, he saw a reflection more vivid than before: an old man crossing the bridge, a child running after a paddle, a fisherman casting a line upstream. The river captured them all, not as separate beings but as a unified flow of existence. Ren felt the first stirrings of understanding. The beauty of the cherry blossoms was not only in their color or fragrance, but in the quiet way they reminded people of the impermanence and continuity of life. To witness it was to honor it, to step lightly within the shared rhythm of nature and humanity. As he continued along the river bank, he noticed the village elder approaching. The elder carried a small basket of offerings: rice cakes, blossoms, and a simple clay bowl filled with water. He nodded to Ren, a silent greeting that acknowledged the shared reverence for the morning, the river, and the petals. "You have come early," the elder said, his voice soft but carrying the weight of years. "The river and the blossoms wait for those who are patient, who listen." Ren bowed. "I wish to learn from them," he said. The elder smiled faintly. "Then you are already on the path. Watch, listen, and reflect. All will teach you if you are still enough to receive it." Ren spent the remainder of the morning beside the river, observing the village, the water, the falling petals, and the subtle changes in light. Every ripple, every shadow, every drifting blossom felt like a living lesson. By the time the sun had climbed higher, the mist began to lift, revealing the full extent of the cherry trees along the river, their branches bending gracefully under the weight of bloom. Ren stood, feeling both small and deeply connected, as though he were part of a vast, ongoing conversation between earth, water, sky, and human heart. He realized then that this journey beneath the cherry blossoms was only beginning. Each step, each reflection, each petal would guide him into a deeper understanding of impermanence, presence, and harmony, the essence of Wa. Chapter 2: Stories of the Village. The morning mist had lifted, leaving the cherry trees bathed in soft sunlight. Ren walked along the river path, following the village elder who had invited him to hear stories passed down through generations. The elder carried a small wooden staff, worn smooth by years of travel and use, and a basket of blossoms for offerings. They arrived at the village square, where stone markers and small shrines dotted the landscape. The elder gestured toward a centuries-old cherry tree, its trunk wide and gnarled, petals fluttering like pink snow. "This tree has witnessed more than we can imagine," the elder began. "It stood when our ancestors built this village. It saw the river carve its path. It felt the weight of winter and the warmth of spring, and it has been a silent witness to the lives of all who dwell here." Ren knelt beside the tree, tracing the grooves of its bark. He could almost feel the passage of time etched into its surface, a tapestry of years, seasons, and memories. Each petal, each bloom, the elder continued, carries a story. Some of joy, some of sorrow. But together, they remind us that life is fleeting, beautiful, and connected. Those who respect this truth walk in harmony with the world. Ren nodded, absorbing the rhythm of the elder's words. He noticed the children playing nearby, chasing petals along the river bank, unaware of the depth of meaning carried by the blossoms. Yet in their laughter, he recognized the continuity of life, the joy of being fully present in each moment. They walked to a small shrine beside the river, where villagers had left offerings, bowls of rice, paper cranes, and blossoms tied with red thread. The elder explained, "The offerings honor our ancestors and the spirits of the river and the trees. We leave them not for reward, but for connection." Ren bowed his head, feeling the pulse of generations beneath him. The village, the cherry trees, the river, they were all threads in the same web, each supporting the other. Chapter 3: The Lantern Ceremony. As evening fell, the village prepared for the annual lantern ceremony beneath the cherry trees. Ren joined the villagers along the river bank, carrying a small lantern he had painted himself with delicate patterns of blossoms and clouds. The air was filled with the scent of incense and the soft rustle of petals drifting down from the trees. The river mirrored the lanterns, doubling their light and creating the illusion of floating stars upon the water. Villagers moved quietly, lighting candles, placing lanterns on the river, and bowing in respect to the river spirits and the trees. Children followed the adults, their small flames trembling in the evening breeze. The combined effect was a shimmering tapestry of light, shadow, and reflection. A monk from the temple began chanting, the melodic syllables rising and falling with the river's flow. Ren knelt beside his lantern, letting the chant wash over him. The sound seemed to blend with the flickering light, the flowing water, and the rustle of petals, creating a living harmony. He watched a lantern drift downstream, carrying wishes and prayers, merging with countless others. The reflection in the water multiplied the effect, making it feel as if the river itself were alive with the hopes and gratitude of the village. The ceremony lasted until the stars appeared overhead, the lanterns glow soft against the night sky. Ren felt a profound sense of connection not only to the villagers and the river but to every life that had passed beneath these trees. As the last lantern floated out of sight, the monk approached him. "The cherry blossoms teach us impermanence, the lanterns teach us continuity," the monk said. "In both, we find balance. Life is fleeting, but its essence endures." Ren bowed deeply. "I understand," he whispered. "And I will carry this understanding forward." The monk nodded. "Then you have learned the true reflection beneath the cherry blossoms." Ren remained by the river, watching the rippling reflections, the lingering petals, and the faint glow of the last lantern. The village slept, the trees stood silently, and the river carried all stories onward. In that moment, he felt the unity of all things, the eternal dance of life, nature, and spirit. Chapter 4: The Silent Winter. Winter arrived quietly, transforming the cherry trees into skeletal silhouettes against the gray sky. Snow fell gently, blanketing the village and river in soft white, muting all sound. Except for the occasional creak of wood or the whisper of wind through the bare branches. Ren walked along the snow-covered path beneath the cherry trees. His breath rose in frosty clouds, and each step on the icy ground made a crisp, fleeting sound. The petals were gone, carried away by autumn winds long past, leaving the branches bare yet dignified, their contours etched sharply against the sky. The village was nearly silent. Few ventured outdoors, and the river flowed slowly, dark beneath its icy surface. Ren carried small offerings of dried fruits and tea leaves, placing them at the foot of the shrine near the river. He knelt in the cold, listening to the hush of the snow, feeling the presence of the past and the endurance of nature. The winter's quiet was different from the spring mornings he had known. It demanded patience and reflection, showing him the impermanence of beauty and life. Each day, as he walked through the silent cherry trees, he learned to embrace stillness, to accept solitude, and to find clarity in the absence of distraction. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Ren heard the faint echo of a temple bell, carried across the frozen river and snow-laden fields. The sound resonated within him, a reminder of the enduring spirit of the village, the trees, and the river. Even in the harshness of winter, life persisted, waiting for the warmth of spring to return. Ren bowed deeply, feeling the cold bite of the air but also a quiet strength growing within him. Winter, with its stillness and silence, had become a teacher, showing him that growth often happens beneath the surface, hidden yet inevitable. Chapter 5: Spring's Renewal. As the snow melted, the village slowly came to life. Buds appeared along the cherry trees, small green and pink hints of what was to come. The river swelled with melted snow, carrying petals, memories, and reflections downstream. Ren walked along the path, marveling at the soft return of life. Birds returned to the trees, singing as they flitted among the branches. Villagers tended their gardens and fields, their hands busy but their movements harmonious with the rhythm of nature. He visited the shrine by the river, placing fresh offerings and kneeling in gratitude. The trees above were starting to bloom, fragile petals trembling in the gentle breeze. The mist lifted from the river, revealing a clear reflection of the trees and the sky, doubled in the water below. The village prepared for the spring festival, celebrating both the blossoms and the renewal of life. Lanterns were hung along the riverbank, paper flowers tied to their frames, reflecting the light on the water's surface. Children ran beneath the trees, laughter echoing through the valley, blending with birdsong and the gentle rush of the river. Ren realized that he had changed. The winter's silence had taught him patience and stillness. The mist and river reflection had taught him awareness and presence, and the stories and rituals of the village had taught him connection. Now, beneath the blossoming cherry trees, he understood the full harmony of the balance and unity of all things. As he released a small lantern onto the river, he watched it drift downstream, joining countless others. Its glow reflected the sunlight, the blossoms, and the sky above. He understood that life was fleeting yet continuous, fragile yet enduring, like the petals floating on the water. Ren bowed, feeling a profound sense of belonging not only to the village or the temple or the river, but to the ongoing rhythm of life itself. The cherry blossoms were not just trees, they were teachers, mirrors, and companions. Epilogue. Eternal petals. Spring had fully returned, and the cherry trees were in full bloom. Petals rained gently upon the river and village, carried on a warm breeze that stirred the water and rustled the trees. The river reflected the pink canopy above, a mirror of sky and earth intertwined. Ren stood beneath the largest cherry tree in the village, the one whose trunk had grown gnarled and wide over centuries. He looked out over the river, watching petals float downstream, some settling gently on the water's surface, others carried beyond sight. Years had passed since his first morning walk beneath these trees. He had witnessed seasons change, rivers swell and recede, snowfall and melt, lanterns float upon the water, and villagers gather for festivals. Each experience had etched lessons into his heart, lessons of patience, impermanence, presence, and connection. The elder who had guided him in his early days was now frail, yet he still moved with dignity among the cherry trees, speaking softly to anyone who sought guidance. Ren approached him, bowing in respect. "You have learned well," the elder said, his eyes bright despite age. "The cherry blossoms teach all who listen. They remind us that life is fleeting, yet enduring, that beauty is transient, yet eternal in memory and spirit." Ren nodded. "I understand. The river, the blossoms, the lanterns, they all carry the rhythm of life. They teach harmony, patience, and presence." The elder smiled. "And so the cycle continues. You have become part of it, and in turn, you guide others. The lessons beneath the cherry blossoms are not mine alone, they belong to all who walk this path." Ren looked at the children playing beneath the trees, their laughter mingling with the whisper of petals in the wind. Lanterns from previous festivals still floated in quiet pools along the river, reflections of past prayers and hopes shimmering in the sunlight. He knelt and released a small lantern of his own, watching it drift downstream. The glow of its flame was caught in the water, reflected alongside the pink petals and the sky above. It was a simple act, yet it symbolized connection, continuity, and gratitude, a small offering to the eternal rhythm of the village, the river, and the cherry trees. Ren rose and walked along the riverbank, feeling the warmth of sunlight and the delicate brush of petals against his face. He understood now that harmony and balance was not a destination but a living practice. It was found in observing the river, tending the lanterns, listening to the wind, and walking beneath the cherry blossoms with reverence and care. As evening approached, the village gathered once more beneath the blooming trees. Lanterns were lit, and the soft glow mingled with the fading sunlight. The river mirrored the colors, doubling the beauty in silent reflection. Ren joined the villagers in placing offerings, bowing in gratitude, and watching the river carry them onward. The elder whispered beside him, "Remember, the blossoms fall and the lanterns drift, yet the lessons endure. Life is fleeting, but its essence continues, just as the river flows and the cherry trees bloom each year." Ren closed his eyes, letting the sounds, sights, and scents of the village, the river, and the blossoms fill him. In that moment, he felt the timeless rhythm of nature and humanity intertwined, the cycle of seasons, and the eternal spirit of Wa rooted deeply within his heart. Night descended, and the lantern's glow persisted against the darkened sky, like stars captured by human hands. The river reflected them, carrying light and memory to distant places, and the cherry trees stood serene and steadfast, their petals drifting silently. Ren understood that this place, this river, these blossoms they would endure far beyond any single life. They would continue to teach, to inspire, to reflect the unity of all things. And he, like the countless souls who had walked beneath the cherry blossoms before him, was part of this eternal dance, bound by reverence, patience, and harmony. As the wind stirred and petals swirled around him, Ren whispered a quiet vow to live in awareness, to honor the fleeting and the enduring, to carry forward the lessons of the cherry blossoms, and to walk always beneath their shade with gratitude. The village settled into a peaceful hush. The lanterns flickered, the river murmured, and the cherry blossoms continued their eternal dance, ever falling, ever renewing, ever teaching. And beneath them, Ren smiled, feeling the heartbeat of the river, the rhythm of the wind, and the infinite reflections beneath the cherry blossoms. In that quiet, timeless moment, he understood the petals would fall. The river would flow, the lanterns would drift, and life would continue beautiful, fleeting, and eternal. The Sparrow's Quiet Watch. Prologue. Morning chirps. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting gentle patterns on the riverbank. Morning had arrived quietly in the village, and with it came the familiar, comforting sound of sparrows chirping in the trees. Each note was small and delicate, yet together they created a tapestry of life, harmonizing with the soft rush of water over stones. Ren walked along the narrow path beside the river, his straw sandals brushing lightly against the moss-covered ground. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming wildflowers. Petals from nearby plum trees drifted lazily in the wind, occasionally landing on his shoulder or in his hair. He paused, listening intently to the sparrows. Their movements were subtle fluttering wings, quick hops on branches, but their presence was profound. It was as if the entire village, the river, the trees, and the creatures that inhabited them were held together in a delicate, unspoken balance. Ren knelt beside a small pool formed by the river's gentle bend. He dipped his hand into the clear water and watched the ripples spread, carrying reflections of the sky, the trees, and the soft, drifting petals. He realized that the world around him was alive in countless, quiet ways, each movement and sound a lesson in attentiveness and presence. A village elder approached, carrying a small basket of offerings, rice cakes and blossoms. He smiled at Ren, nodding as though acknowledging the young man's awareness of the morning's subtle rhythms. "You have come early," the elder said softly. "The sparrows watch, the river flows, and the world teaches those who listen." Ren bowed. "I wish to learn from them," he whispered, feeling the stillness and harmony of the place settle into his heart. The elder nodded, gesturing to the trees and the river. "Then observe. Listen. Reflect. Even the smallest voice, the faintest ripple, can hold the truth of life." Ren spent the morning beside the river, watching the sparrows flit from branch to branch, hearing their tiny calls harmonize with the water and wind. Each detail, the sun's movement, the slight tremor of leaves, the flicker of light on water, was a teacher. And he felt the gentle rhythm of existence infuse his own breathing, his own heartbeat. Chapter 1: Observing the Village. After the morning by the river, Ren walked through the village itself. Thatched roofs were still wet with dew, and smoke curled lazily from chimneys as villagers began their daily routines. Children carried small bundles of firewood, their laughter mingling with the distant call of a woodpecker. The sparrows moved among them, darting through the courtyards, hopping along fences, and perching on rooftops. They were ordinary creatures, yet Ren felt their presence imbued with a sense of purpose and watchfulness. Their quiet vigilance mirrored the flow of life in the village, steady, persistent, and attentive. He visited the marketplace, now beginning to hum with activity. Merchants displayed bundles of fresh herbs, pottery, and dried fish. Each action was deliberate, almost ceremonial, as villagers traded goods, exchanged greetings, and tended their stalls. There was no rush, no loud clamor, only a natural rhythm that Ren felt aligned with the flow of the river and the flight of the sparrows. Ren paused at the edge of the central square, where an ancient cherry tree stood. Its trunk was wide and gnarled, petals yet to bloom but buds hinting at the coming season. He noticed a small family feeding crumbs to the sparrows, who flitted eagerly around their hands, wings beating softly. The scene reminded him that life's continuity depended on care, attention, and respect, even in the smallest gestures. An elder approached, recognizing Ren. "The sparrows observe all," he said quietly. "They watch the river, the village, the seasons, and each passing soul. Their vigilance reminds us to be mindful, to see what is before us, and to cherish every fleeting moment." Ren nodded, feeling a quiet reverence. He understood that observing the village was not simply watching. It was learning, participating, and attuning himself to the rhythms of the natural and human world alike. He spent the remainder of the day walking the village paths, pausing to watch the sparrows dart between rooftops, listening to the children's laughter, feeling the warmth of sunlight on the stones and earth. By evening, he returned to the riverbank, where the water reflected the growing hues of sunset. Ren knelt, letting the image of the village, the river, and the sparrows imprint itself on his mind. He felt part of a larger harmony, where humans, animals, and nature coexisted in quiet interconnection. In that observation, he discovered the first lesson of Wa presence, attentiveness, and respect for the subtle, enduring rhythms of life. As dusk approached, the sparrows settled in the trees, chirping softly as the village lights began to flicker. Ren watched in silence, understanding that the day's final observation was as vital as the morning's first. The quiet watch of the sparrows, like the rhythm of the river, was constant an invitation to live mindfully, harmoniously, and with gratitude. Chapter 2 Stories from the Elder. The morning sun was gentle, casting long shadows across the village square. Ren followed the elder to a small wooden house at the edge of the village, where the aroma of incense and freshly cooked rice drifted into the air. Inside, the elder invited Ren to sit beside a low wooden table. The room was simple tatami mats, sliding paper doors, and small shelves holding wooden carvings and scrolls. The elder poured tea into delicate porcelain cups, the steam rising like a gentle mist. "Do you see the sparrows, Ren?" the elder began. "They are more than small birds. They are observers, messengers, and teachers. They remind us to live attentively, to care for one another, and to notice the fleeting moments of beauty that surround us." Ren listened intently as the elder spoke of the village's history, the river, and the cherry trees that lined its banks. Stories of ancestors, seasonal festivals, and the lives of those long gone filled the air, weaving together past and present. Children entered quietly, carrying small bundles of rice and crumbs. They placed the offerings in a shallow dish for the sparrows and knelt to watch them feed. The birds accepted the gifts eagerly, hopping between the children's hands and shoulders. "Even the smallest act of kindness," the elder said, "connects us to the world." The sparrows carry the memory of these acts, and through them, the village itself remembers. Ren realized that the elder's words were mirrored in the daily lives of the villagers. Every smile, every helping hand, every gesture of care was part of a greater harmony, as vital as the river's flow or the wind through the trees. By midday, Ren joined the children outside. They showed him how to scatter crumbs carefully, to watch the sparrows without startling them, and to listen to the subtle rustle of their wings. He began to understand the gentle rhythm of attention, the quiet presence that formed the core of Wa. Chapter 3 Lanterns and Evening Song. As evening approached, the village prepared for the annual lantern ceremony along the river. Ren helped the children place their handmade lanterns on the river's edge, each painted with blossoms, birds, and soft patterns of clouds and wind. The sky turned a soft amber as the sun descended, and the lanterns flickered to life, their warm glow mirrored in the water. Sparrows returned to the branches above, settling quietly as if watching the ceremony with patient eyes. Villagers moved with care, lighting lanterns, bowing in respect, and whispering prayers for ancestors, for the river, and for the trees. The gentle murmur of voices blended with the soft chant of the temple bells, the rustle of leaves, and the trickle of water. Ren placed his lantern on the river, watching it drift among hundreds of others. The light reflected in the water, creating an endless network of glowing paths. Interwoven with the shadows of the trees and the petals drifting silently from the cherry blossoms. The elder spoke softly beside him. The sparrows watch as the lanterns float. They witness our devotion, our care, and our attentiveness. Through them, we learn to honor the small, quiet moments of life. Ren knelt, observing the reflections on the water. Each lantern was fleeting, yet its glow remained in memory. Each sparrow's flight was brief, yet it reminded him to remain present, to notice, and to respect the impermanence and continuity of life. Night fell fully, and the village settled into a hushed reverence. Lanterns glimmered, sparrows rested in their nests, and the river carried both light and memory downstream. Ren felt a deep connection to the village, the birds, and the river. He realized that harmony was not something imposed, but something lived through observation, care, and gentle attentiveness. He rose and walked along the river bank, letting the lantern's reflections and the murmurs of the village sink into his heart. The sparrow's watch, steady and patient, had become a symbol for him to live mindfully, to respect the ephemeral, and to embrace the rhythm of life that connected all beings. Chapter 4: Winter's Stillness. Winter arrived quietly, draping the village and surrounding hills in a soft, white blanket. Snow muffled the familiar sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chatter of villagers, and even the playful chirping of sparrows. Only the occasional creak of wooden roofs or the whisper of wind through bare branches disturbed the stillness. Ren walked along the snow-covered river bank, each step leaving a crisp imprint in the powder. His breath rose in thin clouds, and the cold bit gently at his cheeks. The cherry trees, now bare, stood like silent sentinels, their branches etched sharply against the gray sky. The river flowed steadily beneath a thin layer of ice, its water carrying the memory of past seasons, past lives. Ren knelt beside a small opening in the ice and watched a solitary sparrow land on a branch above the water. Its tiny movements were deliberate, its watchful eyes scanning the surroundings. Despite the harshness of winter, it survived, vigilant and enduring. The village was nearly deserted. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, and the occasional villager passed by, carrying firewood or tending a stubborn winter crop. Ren carried small offerings of dried fruits and rice, placing them at the foot of the shrine near the river. He knelt, feeling the quiet pulse of life beneath the snow and ice. Winter, with its silence and isolation, demanded patience. Each day, as Ren walked beneath the bare cherry trees and listened to the faint murmur of the river, he learned to accept stillness, to observe without interruption, and to recognize the strength that comes from endurance. One evening, the sound of the temple bell drifted across the snowy valley, its resonance clear and pure. Ren closed his eyes, letting the sound flow through him. It reminded him that life continues, even in quiet, even in apparent dormancy. The sparrow, perched in the frost-laden branches, embodied that enduring spirit. By winter's end, Ren felt a subtle shift within himself. He had grown more attentive, more patient, and more aware of the fragile balance of all living things. The stillness of snow and the quiet vigilance of the sparrows had become lessons etched into his heart. Chapter 5 Spring Awakening. As the snow melted, the village stirred to life once more. Buds appeared along the cherry trees, and the river swelled with the melted snow, carrying reflections of sky, trees, and the first blossoms. Ren walked along the river bank, observing the rebirth of life. Sparrows returned, chirping and flitting among the branches, their energy a lively contrast to the silent winter. Villagers began their daily routines again, working the fields, tending gardens, and preparing for the spring festival. He visited the shrine, placing fresh offerings and bowing in gratitude. The cherry trees were blossoming, their delicate pink flowers trembling in the gentle spring breeze. Petals drifted into the river, joining reflections of sky and trees in a dance of impermanence and renewal. The village prepared for the annual festival, a celebration of blossoms, life, and the continuity of seasons. Lanterns were hung along the river, paper flowers tied to their frames. Children chased petals along the paths, their laughter mingling with the song of returning birds and the gentle rush of the river. Ren released a small lantern onto the water, watching it float downstream among countless others. Its glow reflected the sunlight and the soft pink petals, creating a tapestry of light and color. He understood that life, like the lanterns and the sparrows, moves forward, carrying memory, care, and connection. He watched the villagers gather beneath the blossoming trees, their rituals and laughter harmonizing with the rhythm of nature. Each act of care, each quiet observation, each playful moment was a thread in the tapestry of Wa, the harmony of existence. Ren felt the culmination of all he had learned: winter's patience, the sparrow's vigilance. The river's flow and the villagers' mindful lives had all shaped his understanding. The essence of harmony, attentiveness, and presence was no longer abstract, it was alive within him. Flowing with the river, drifting with the petals, and fluttering in the wings of the sparrows. As evening fell, the cherry blossoms glowed softly under the setting sun. Ren knelt once more, placing a lantern in the river and watching it drift into the distance. The sparrows perched above, their eyes glinting in the golden light, as if acknowledging his understanding. The village settled into quiet, the river carried its reflections, and the cherry trees whispered in the wind. Ren knew that he had become part of a living cycle, a harmony that connected humans, birds, trees, and water in an eternal watch of life, presence, and awe. Epilogue: The Sparrow's Eternal Watch. The festival's lanterns had long since drifted downstream, their lights merging with the night sky, like scattered stars reflected in the flowing river. The petals of cherry blossoms still floated on the water's surface, carried gently by the current. The season was passing again, and yet the quiet harmony of the village seemed timeless. Ren stood upon the stone bridge, watching as the river wound its way beyond the horizon. He had come to the village as a wanderer, uncertain and seeking, but the seasons had carried him into a deeper understanding. Each sparrow's song, each leaf's fall, each whisper of wind had become part of his inner rhythm. The sparrows remained, their presence as constant as the river's flow. They perched on rooftops, on the shrine gate, on the branches of blossoming trees. Their watchful eyes mirrored the cycles of nature, never hurried, never still, always attentive. Ren realized now that the sparrow's quiet watch was not merely a bird's instinct but a lesson for all who sought harmony. To observe without judgment, to endure without complaint, to cherish without clinging, this was the essence of Wa. He remembered the winter's silence, the still patience of snow, and the way life returned in spring. He remembered the villagers' laughter, their reverence for the shrine, their lanterns floating into the river's embrace. And he remembered his own transformation, from a restless traveler to someone who could listen deeply to nature, to others, to himself. One evening, as twilight settled over the village, Ren sat beneath the cherry trees by the river. A sparrow descended nearby, hopping along the ground, tilting its head curiously. For a long moment, man and bird regarded one another. The sparrow's tiny presence seemed to hold an entire world of meaning. Ren smiled softly. "You have watched all along, haven't you?" he murmured. The sparrow chirped once, then fluttered to a higher branch, as if acknowledging his words. Its silhouette merged with the deepening colors of dusk, the purple of distant hills, the fading pink of blossoms, and the silver of the river reflecting the moon. The temple bell rang in the distance, low and resonant. Its sound rippled through the village, carrying with it a reminder that time flows, but presence remains. Ren closed his eyes and breathed deeply, letting the moment settle into him. He knew he would leave the village someday, for the path of a wanderer was not one of permanence. But he also knew that the lessons of the sparrows, the river, the seasons, and the people would never leave him. Wherever he went, their quiet watch would be within him. As the moon rose, casting its silver glow upon the rooftops and river, the sparrows continued their nightly vigil. Their tiny forms, so delicate yet so enduring, became guardians of silence and continuity. Wren rose and walked slowly back to the shrine, bowing once more in gratitude. He whispered a prayer, not for fortune or protection, but for harmony, for the enduring balance of nature and people, of past and present, of stillness and movement. The village lay quiet beneath the moonlight, and the sparrows, ever watchful, kept their silent vigil. In that enduring silence, Wren understood the sparrow's quiet watch was eternal. Not bound by seasons, not limited by place, it lived on in every attentive heart, in every whispered breeze, in every gentle step upon the earth. And so, as the petals fell and the river flowed, harmony endured, woven into the fabric of life by the watchful eyes of sparrows and the presence of those who listened.